All right, so for the next 4 or 5 days, we're going to look at a couple of different methods to solve when we do have a b term. So remember the square roots method that we did the last couple days before the quiz were only if there was no b part to the problem. So there's two other methods. I mean, technically you could graph it, but there's a couple other methods that we're going to look at. One's called completing the square, and one is the quadratic formula. I think there's benefits to knowing both, but if you just knew one, you could solve all the problems. But it's easier to do completing the square in one case, and it's easier to do quadratic formula in one case. So knowing both of them is for sure excuse me, the right thing to do. Might seem kind of unorthodox, but there's, let me see, 5 or 6 steps to completing the square. The first couple are really simple, and we're actually not even going to do those today. I'll add those in tomorrow. So we're actually, and I'll put okay, we have step 1, step 2. I'm not even going to write them down because we're going to do step 3 and step 4 today. And so and I'll go over the problems in a second, but step 3 says do half the b term square it, and I'm going to say add to both sides because that's what we're going to do eventually. But we're not going to do both sides today. We're just going to do one side. And I'll do some examples so you know what that means, because right now you're probably looking at that going, what is he talking about? And so some of the problems we're just going to do step 3. And then some we're going to also do step 4. Step 4 is factor the left side of we have an equation, right and left side of the equal sign. Okay. So when we do the factor of the left side, we're going to use the square root of the c number. Okay. So what the heck am I talking about? So I can squeeze a couple of the first problems down here. So you're only going to have 12 problems today. Your first 6 problems will look something like this. And there's just a C right there. And the directions will say, find the value of C that completes the square. Okay, this is step 3. And it'll be a little bit clearer, excuse me, when I show you the next set of problems. Okay, so remember the a is by the x squared, so I'm going to write it up here, but so remember that this is kind of our form of a quadratic. So the a number is next to the x squared, the b number is next to the x, and the c number is just at the end. Okay, so I'm going to do half of 6 equals 3. Then I'm going to square it. 3 squared is 9. And for our problems today, 9 is the answer. Okay, but 9 is going to go where the C is in our problem when we do the whole steps. But this is one of the key steps to the whole problem. is figuring out what goes where the C is to make this like a good like problem to work with. Okay, so we're gonna, we'd end up writing like this eventually. And that's like an important step to get to. Okay, so really simple, just half of half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9, and on we go. Okay? So if we had okay, and so notice like this first one, positive 6, and this one's negative 10. The positive and negative doesn't matter for step 3, because when we do squared to the second power, negative negative makes positive, positive and positive makes positive, like it doesn't matter. So we're going to do half of 10, 5, 5 squared, 25. Okay, and that's the answer for the problem, because it just says find the value of C that completes the square. So it just wants to know like what's supposed to go where the C is. Okay? All right. You know what? There's a couple that I'm going to get rid of. So your problem's actually going to be 8 problems instead of 12. So that's a good thing. All right. So we're going to get to this like do step 3, and we're going to do step 4. Factor the left side. Use the square root of C. Okay? Remember that. Use the square root of C. Use the square root of C. What number goes where the C is? So 9, 25, like whatever the numbers are. So the second set of problems, it's going to say complete the square for the expression, then factor. So that's the square root of C. So if I had, let's say x squared plus 12x, and then that's all the problem's going to, it's going to be, there's nothing going to be there at the end. So we're still doing step 3 and step 4. Okay, do step 3 and 4. So step 3, half of 12 is 6. Then do 6 squared. And so now the problem is going to change. I'm going to put that 36 at the end. Okay. So then, this goes right there. So then it wants to factor. We're going to have x and x. This one we're going to have plus and plus because both of these are positive. And so I said use the square, so really we'd ask the question, what times what is 36? It adds up to 12. Square root of 36 is 6. And 6 plus 6 is 12. So what we've created is x plus 6, x plus 6, which really can be written as x plus 6 squared. And that is the answer. Okay, and that should look familiar if you did your homework on Wednesday, because we solved problems that looked like that. So completing the square is really getting it to a point where I can do this because I know how to solve that. Okay? We're just kind of practicing some of the skills along the way to get not have to do everything all at once. Okay? So if I had problem like that, okay, half of 14 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So my new problem will be 14x plus 49. Okay, and then so notice this one, this is where the negative does come into play. So when I factor it, it's x and x, and so the number at the end, how do I make positive 49? multiply two positive numbers or multiply two negative numbers will give me positive 49. The negative 14, this is where it comes into play because in the parentheses, it's both negative. Okay? Square root of 49, 7. And we get x minus 7 squared. Okay, so on both of these, like I have positive 12, and so I used positive for both. I have negative 14, and I used negative for both. In completing the square, that will always happen. Okay, the number at the end, the 36 and the 49, will always be positive because we're squaring. And when you square something, two negatives make a positive, two positives make a positive. It's always going to be positive at the end. So therefore, when we factor, it's always going to be the b term, whatever sign that is. So if it's positive like the 12, both positive. If it's negative like the 14, both negative. Okay? So all you're going to do today, again, is going to be 8 problems. I said 12 earlier, but I'm going to eliminate 4 of them that would involve fractions because, honestly, if you're going to have to use fractions, I would tell you use the quadratic formula, which we'll learn about next week. So I'm not going to force you to do one that's fractions because it's weird and it's hard and it's more difficult than it needs to be. Quadratic formula is easier, so I'm going to skip those. Okay, so you're going to have 8 problems. 4 and 4, it's going to say complete the square and factor. So the answer is the 2 black like boxes down here. And if you're doing it right, you're going to have x plus 6, x plus 6, x minus 7, x minus 7. You're going to have the same thing in the parentheses. So you can write it like I did. All right, so trying to just do a little bit at a time because this process can be a little weird and lengthy, but we'll figure it out, okay? All right, have a good Friday, good weekend. Get your assignment done today. It's only 8 problems. That way you don't got to worry about it over the weekend, okay? Have a good one.